Alright, so just had some coffee. I'm going to proceed to the gasifier stove. I'm going to use basic recipe for the one that you can find online for paint can Progresso stove. So you're going to quart paint can that you can find usually Home Depot, Lowe's, places like that. And standard Progresso can, they're all the same size, 20 ounces. In this case, it says 18.5 ounces. So don't be fooled by that. They're all the same size. And you can also get this size of can. If it happens that you don't eat the soup, then am I thinking of fruit cocktail type cans? You can find them in 20 ounce and also different sizes. Bush's beans come in this size can as well. And what we're talking about is this ratio. Bush's beans are a little bit shorter, and what that's going to do is going to sit inside this can at a shorter height, which can be a good thing. And I'll explain that a little bit more as we get to building it. What we're going to do is we're going to cut out the bottom of this, set this up inside, and it's going to just fit really tightly right inside there. What else we're going to do is, we got to make, besides that, you're going to see it's going to sit like that. We're going to need a couple things. We're going to need a pot stand, something to hold the pot above the level of this. And there are a number of ways that people do that. You've seen in my kit the way that I do it, which is essentially, well, this is the top that I've been using, and I set that right on top of there like that. I like this configuration. It gives you a good a chimney effect, but it's a little bit tall. If that's not real practical for you, that there are other ways that I'll show you that you can do that. So it's not as tall, even if it's not quite as effective, in my opinion and in my experience, which, you know, I haven't tried everything. So you might find ways that work even better for you. So just started. See how easy it is to take off this tape. Actually, it looks like I found this one at Goodwill for $1. So that's something to look out for. You do sometimes see people use them for decorations and stuff like that. I think maybe I'm not going to worry about it right now. Let's see. What do we do first? First I'll just take the bottom off of this, and that'll make everything a lot easier just for like demonstrating things. So I'll just, standard can opener. There are some possible reasons why you might want to use one of those, the new fancy kind that gives you, the perfect edges. You can just get the whole thing off. But then what you lose is this reinforced bottom edge. So I wouldn't use it in this case, but there may be other cases where it might be handy to use that type of bottom. Type of can opener. Side edge, so that's what I meant to say. Side edge can opener. Looks like I put the camera down too. Let's aim the camera down. And I see also in the video there, you can see back here, these are the type of pellets that I use. I was lucky enough to find these. Like, you can find these at Home Depot, and if you can't find them, it probably means that you're in too hot of a climate where they don't feel like they need to, basically nobody's using pellet stoves. But you just want to go to your hardware store, ask if they have wood pellets for a pellet burning stove, and they'll sell you a 40-pound bag usually, and it should be really cheap, like $4. In this case, it was $6. I found it at the grocery store, not at Home Depot. And which is interesting because I'm not really in that much of a mountainous climate, but at least it's mountainous enough that it snowed up in the mountains up right above here, and this is the closest thing to them, so I guess it totally makes sense. So the heaters, that brand works really well. And also mention about buying this type of fuel, that if you find them a lot more expensive, like you can find pellets in like little bags, but they'll be like $14 or something like that. And that means that you're buying special smoking pellets that they'll be like apple wood and mesquite and stuff like that. You don't want that. I don't even know if they'll work. They'll probably smoke way too much because they're made for smoking. So don't get those. You're looking for a 40-pound bag for about $4. All right, so now we got the bottom of this off, and then now we'll be able to demonstrate just setting the Progresso can. It just fits right inside the edge like that. I always wondered about this. Nobody was really showing it online exactly how it fits, and it just it seriously just fits so neatly right into there. It's kind of unreal how it does it. And you can set it up there, And if you want, it fits in a way that it's really tight enough that you can use the stove, and then you'll be able to pull it back out if you want to exchange stoves and try different combustion chambers. And then when you want to do it permanently, just take it and just like hammer it down in there so it's basically permanently stuck in there. And then maybe even like you know, curl down the edges a little bit so it's it's not only stuck in there better, but has a better seal too. But for experimenter's sake, just leave it kind of loose. That means it might fall out sometimes too, which is not a big deal because it's not going to fall very far. It's just right there. It stays inside the stove. Never had any problems because of it. So there's that. And then now we got to deal with our air. I'm going to take it back out so we could drill our holes. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to drill some holes at the bottom of here, and then we need to drill some holes inside the inside of, let's see, this is the best angle to show you. Drill some holes in the inside of the Progresso can. So what that was going to look like is, like once I get the can back out, it's really tight in there. There, pops out. Okay, I might as well take the label off. So just right around the top edge. And I'm going to use the same hole pattern. People seem to have pretty good success. I've had pretty good success. Make some large holes, exactly the same size as we've been doing in with these other cans, just like this. And I'm going to put like 6 around there. So these holes that we put around the top here, which is going to allow the air to go inside the top edge, right above the fuel. So the gases are going to rise up out of the heated combustion chamber and rise up and actually combust up here. So it really just shouldn't be considered the combustion chamber, but it is the inner chamber, and I guess it is going to combust like right here. And there are different ways that people do it. What's really important is that you need to have a lot of air coming in, and I'll just out of thought about what order to present this in, but it doesn't matter. You want to have a lot of air coming into the combustion chamber, and there are multiple ways to accomplish that. You could have a lot of little holes. You could have a couple of big holes. And in general, just as a principle of airflow, fluid dynamics, the larger the hole, the less resistance you're going to put in the way of the airflow or fluids in general. If you choose to use smaller holes of the same area as the big hole, the smaller holes are still going to present more resistance. So just go ahead and use a bigger hole for this purpose until you start experimenting with more advanced designs, such as like a forced air type of stove, in which you put a fan outside of this whole contraption that pushes air up in here, up the sides, into the burn chamber. And because it's forced, you might be able to use smaller holes and make it resemble a regular gas stove a little bit more by making a bunch of small holes that shoot into here. But I haven't gotten to that stage yet, but I hope to make a video because I do have one that's basically made. I just haven't done a lot of experimenting with it. So, let's get started. Holes the same way. I don't know any other different way to say it, to present it other than same thing. We're going to make our 6 holes at the top, and the same way on the bottom. We're going to make our 6 holes around the bottom. So I'm just going to proceed to do that, and then I'll meet you back when those are done. Though I guess this one. Key, our holes are going to be on the outside here, around the outside, and then on the top of this one. So outside of that one, inside of that one, and we're just going to go around the edges. And then once it's put together, it'll become a little bit more obvious what we're doing. Alright, stop the video. I remembered one other thought. That, yeah, it is that simple, and a lot of people do that. But one of the things I want to do is give you some helpful improvements. And one of the issues, and so I'm going to do this one. Actually, let's do this. Let's do it this way. If I shove this in here, and we know that we need to have air coming into here and rising up. It's going to come into here and rise up in order to come into the burn chamber. The other function of the incoming air, though, is going to be to enter the burn chamber from the bottom directly, and in order to help the fuel in there get burning in the first place. So that's like sort of your first order of business, get this stuff burning. And for that to happen, you need a little bit of air coming in from someplace. So in order for that to happen, it's sometimes helpful to have, well, basically, it's not just helpful, it's necessary to have air coming in from the bottom. There is, however, a question of how much air do you want to come into the bottom, and that's like, it's kind of a big deal. Let's see how to explain this the best way. Okay, so you want to have enough air that come in there to fully combust this in order so that the inner chamber can get hot. This is a particular issue when you don't use that much fuel, so it's way down at the bottom, and then it's like it doesn't get any air. It doesn't really get enough air from the top, and well, you got to make sure it has enough air from the bottom, therefore. So we got to find a way to put holes in the bottom, and there's a lot of ways you could do it. You could drill a bunch of holes. You can cut out the bottom, put sort of a grating on the bottom. A lot of people do that. But I go to sort of the opposite way. It's not exactly the opposite way. You want to have air in there, but not too much. So I would not cut it out and put a grating, a literal grating on there, because it lets too much air come in to the inner chamber, and you're just burning a little bit too much in here, wasting fuel because it's just burning a little bit too hot. But if you have issues with burning too hot, then you might actually try that. I mean, any of the things I say, you are kind of free to, they're sort of like guidelines. You can be feel free to say, I'm going to ignore that one and try it a different way, and for my own experiments, and try all the ways. Because remember, this is really cheap. It's just a cheap can. We got another one right here. We can cut them up in all sorts of different ways, try them in different configurations. So nothing I say is a hard and fast rule by any means. Just try all kinds of things. I'm just giving you some kind of guidelines. One of the things that you want to do is to make sure your holes, at the very least, are above the line of this one, of the thing at the bottoms, because we're going to put some holes in the bottom in some configuration, and I have a way that I like to do it, so I'll show you that. But we want to make sure that at the very least it's above the line. That means if you're using something like a Bush's Beans can, which is shorter, that means that you're going to have to, well, there's a couple things that is going to happen. Let's say we used a short can that only goes down to this far. And say your reasoning was that you're going to let the air come into here, and that way the air is underneath the can, so you'll be able to get a lot of air coming into the inner chamber. So your inner chamber will be able to combust really fast. You'll get a lot of air to it. However, it's also possible, and this happens to me a lot, when I had a stove that had a much shorter inner chamber, is that the air would come in and blow up the top in the middle and put the fire out. That would happen like all the time. I was always having to deal with like putting up windscreens and stuff so that the fire doesn't get blown out, because it was always coming in the hole, blowing right up into the chamber and just blowing the fire out. So if you want to avoid that, depending on what size you use for a can, if you don't use a Progresso can, then you want to make sure that your hole is high enough. That's if you want to avoid that issue. It might not be an issue for you if you're not in a place that's very windy, or if you have really good windscreens and all that sort of stuff. So those are different options that you have. You'll see different people doing different videos online, and maybe some of the things that I tell you will help you like watch those videos and sort of interpret what they're doing. Maybe they don't necessarily know what they're doing. They said, this was always had this problem with this, and I kind of solved it doing this, and you might be able to look and go, well, I see why you had that problem. It's because you designed it in a particular way where you're letting a lot of air down here and it's just blowing your fire out. Or maybe you're not getting enough air into your burn chamber in order for it to actually combust, which can happen if your burn chamber isn't very tall. Now, Progresso can, I like the Progresso can. The height is really good. It allows you to put enough pellets in here that it'll last almost exactly an hour on sort of average conditions. If it's cold, it's going to use a lot more fuel to try to get up to heat, and to heat, well, basically to heat itself, to keep itself going. It has to use extra fuel. It's very inefficient when it's cold and wet and damp weather. When it's hot and dry, it lights up immediately. You know, you just put a little bit of lighter fluid, poof, and then you're already like doing gasifier effect in there, have pretty flame patterns and stuff like that. So it works really well. Actually, I've had good experience with both cans. But this one seems a little bit better at shielding from the effect of too much air getting into the bottom and blowing the fire out, which is a big hassle for me. But it may not be a big of an issue once I start adding some other stuff, which we're going to experiment with in the later video. So, seems like a lot of explanation, but there's really a lot of science behind this, and there's a lot of videos of people doing different things. And for me, it took a long time to sort of process it and figure out like people have so many different opinions on how this ought to work, and they're trying different things and stuff. And I had to sort of sort it together and do my own experiments. And ultimately, that's what you're going to have to do too: is do some of your own experiments, figure out what's practical for you. And you know, what you like, what's your identity. I like Progresso soup. I like the idea of putting Progresso in there. I'm not going to use some kind of Frankenbeans thing because I don't eat that stuff. So, I made that original mark at a place where I was probably going to let too much air down in there for my preference. So I'm going to raise that hole up a little bit. That's why I stopped the video. I'm going to make sure that where my hole is a little bit higher than the level. It turns out I can actually, can I use this? I can mark my holes by putting that in there. It just fits right in there, right neat. Just my hobo stove that I just made. I put that in there. Unfortunately, this hole is a little bit too small, so I won't really be able to use it. So I am just going to have to basically mark this, and let's see what can I do in order to be consistent about it. I'm just going to, now that's interesting. Little hole there, little thing, and that's about the size of the hole I want, and I want to make sure it's above the level of the can. So I'll put the can in there, and that hole comes down about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to make sure wherever my hole is, it's got to be above 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to mark the center of my hole higher than that. It's about right there. Let's see, do that. I'm just going to mark, that's where the bottom of the edge is. So I'm just going to go around and do that. Once I mark off my circles. So where's that at? There's my first one. Do that. So there's mark 1 here, there, turn it around. Yeah, so that'll do it. I can mark my holes around there now. Can you see this? Probably hiding it. Alright, so I'll mark that. And then I'll also mark my Progresso can, and then I'll do all my drilling off camera, since it'll be exactly the same and you won't learn anything new anyway. So mark that. In this case, again, want to make it as high on there as I can. So in the Progresso can, you're kind of like aiming at the middle of this band here. That's where I'm aiming anyway, and you can feel free to do what you want. Big holes, small holes. Okay, I'm ready to start drilling. Back with you in a second. Alright, so I got these cut out now, and I'll just be able to set that up there, and of course it makes it easier to explain at this point that all you need to do is, well, not all you need to do. Once you set it up, the air comes into here, it travels up the channel, and it comes out the little holes on the inside. So we have our essential, the essential business of our gasifying cook stove, and the only thing that's missing is we do need air to get in there. So there's a couple ways to do it, and I'm going to show you one that's, I think it's basically unique to me from all the videos that I've seen. You could cut out this with a can opener, and then find some complicated way with like sticking people make a lot of removable grills on the bottom, or they just drill a bunch of holes. I have one that I think saves you a couple steps, and also I think actually works better. Now, I'm not positive about that, but I can give you some reasons why I think it would work better. like I mentioned, having bigger holes is, the same reason we use these that I explained. Rather than having a bunch of little holes that have the same area, the little holes are going to provide more resistance to the airflow than just one larger hole. So that you'll be able to get a lot more air to come in that way. So we do want to get a decent amount of air in here, but we don't exactly know at this point how much we really need. So I'm going to give you a way that's sort of adjustable so that once you set it up, you decide, oh, I'm getting way too much air, you can kind of close up the hole a little bit. So that way is based on a way that was based on a removable grid. And basically what you did in that case was, oh, I should have brought it out here. I think it's like in the truck. I'm not going to get it right now. But what you do is you just cut it out like this. And I'm not going to do it with this one, though I probably could. But no, actually I'm going to save it just in case. But you cut it into here so that you're creating a fan shape, and then you'll like give them a little twist. You won't really have to give them a twist, and then it will create like a fan. And actually I will get it. It'll just take me a second. I think I know where it is. So this is a fan type grill. You can see all you do is you put the notches on there, and you can see that these are twisted. But once you cut it in there, you'll find that they sort of twist on their own. You don't really have to do this. So we're going to create basically this on the bottom of there, but it doesn't really need to be this elaborate. All we need to do is just make a couple of slits in there. So we can just do it this way. I'll put my gloves back on. And actually, let me use this to explain the benefits of it. What's good about this is that unlike a whole bunch of little holes, we have a couple of larger holes, and you can see that they just sort of come through there. The thing is, it doesn't matter how big the hole is. Well, actually it does, but this will allow basically all the air that hits against here. Nothing is actually blocked. Everything is going to be funneled into one of the spokes of the fan. So all of the air can be used. It's not like if you have a bunch of little holes, it'll be just like, it'll hit this and then some of it will be able to seep through, but you'll create a lot of turbulence under there if you just had sort of if you just drilled holes. In this case, there's much less turbulence because it comes in here, it spins, and all the air will come up through. But if you get too much air, you just kind of can close these off by, doing that. And if you need more air, then you could open it up even more, and you can still see it's, from this perspective, it's basically opaque. Nothing you're not going to lose a bunch of pellets down in there, so long as you're not making these bigger than the width of a pellet, which it's not. So you could do that, and I did do that in many cases, where I literally took the bottom off. I think it was because I was using a different can. So I took the bottom off of there and used either the same one, or you could use something different. You could cut out one of these, make yourself a grill that's like this, that fits in there. And because of the way that this is curved, as long as you leave enough of the lip, then you'll be able to just lay it down in there. And that will give you sort of a removable grill. I don't know why you need a removable grill. What I was thinking at the time, I don't know what it was, but it just has, the grill always falls out and stuff like that. There's sort of no reason to have it removable. So just make a permanent one, use the bottom that you're already given, and make the appropriate holes on it. So we're just going to make a star pattern in there, and I'm going to go ahead and mark it for 6. If I can find my pen. So I'll just do this again. 2, that's not even straight. So there's 1, there's 2, and I'm going to just eyeball this one, because this is not a thing that anybody actually sees, so I'm not worried about this at all. So again, you just want to make sure that, just like we did with the folding pattern, I'm going to show you how to eyeball it a little bit. If you put the dots down, you want to make sure that if you put one here, that the distance from here to here is the same as the distance from here to here, and so forth. You just want to make sure that they're all even. So this one has to be halfway between there and there, so you put that dot in there. Now make sure that this is equal to that, is equal to that, is equal to that. So you just keep on adjusting back and forth until you got it. And then once you got it on one side, then you can just go opposite side, and then opposite side, and now you got your 6 pattern. So I'm going to make stick slits in here with my knife. Put my gloves in. Don't go too close to the center, but you can go fairly close to the center. So like there's the center. Let me just go ahead and mark the center. And I'm going to avoid it. So there, and then I'm going to just say start kind of like here, 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 here. And there. So I'll start there and just make a slit that just kind of goes out to about there. Okay, there it goes. Progresso can is a little bit tough. It's a really well reinforced bottom. So I'm not going to worry about being too strict about it. Just do that, put one on the other side. I don't think you really need 6. On the other stove I have 4. And okay, let's do another one here. Okay, just 2 more. And 1 more. There. Now, to get them to do what we want, in a fan shape, just all in the same direction, just flip the end up a little bit. Let's do that. Fan almost done. Give it a little twist. You want more of an opening. So from this perspective it seemed kind of small, but if I show it to you this way you can see that the holes actually quite sizable. So they'll hit here and then they'll spin their way in there so that almost all of the air hitting the bottom can be used for combustion fuel. And there's 2 things. So I mentioned this before. If you were to fill this all the way to the top, this air hole down the bottom isn't going to really do all that much. But it's there. It helps. It'll help push the air up a little bit. For the most part, if you fill it all the way to the top with your pellets, and you put your lighter fluid up here or whatever kind of tinder you're going to use, and just light it on the top, well, the combustion air is just going to come from these holes. So this is really not relevant. Where it becomes relevant is if you are only going to use a little bit. And an interesting thing about a Progresso can is you can kind of time it out. Using this is about this length right here is about 1/3 of the time, and if this is about an hour of pellets, this is about 20 minutes right there. So you got 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour. So if you're down there and you only need to cook a short time, 20 minutes or so, then in that case these holes become very important, because the airflow up here, it's just going to kind of suck the air out of here. The air up here is going to be heated, so it wants to go up. So it's going to try to suck the air from down here. So this is going to be really important for getting your fire going. But we don't want too much air down there in most cases. We definitely don't want enough in there that it's going to put the fire out. So that's always going to be an issue and things to think about when you're using your stove and working on your own improvements, which you should totally do. So now, we essentially have the entire thing done, and that's all we have to do. There's just only a couple things. As I shove that in there, I don't know if you heard that pop. It's a nice little satisfying pop that, you know, fits in there really well. And it looks pretty good, other than that little Goodwill tag that I can't seem to get off. I'll work on it another time. But looks a lot like the Solo stove, right? It's basically this design. Of course, Solo stove got their design from the Bush Buddy design, which is, you know, it's more than this. It's like actually like, I think it's riveted. I think they actually rivet everything into place. Very similar design. But this is just a really practical knockoff of that idea that you can make. Just, you know, you buy the paint can, get yourself a free Progresso can, make some holes, and you're off to work. You can start cooking. The only thing we need now is some type of way to support our pots above the thing. We can do this. I found it doesn't really work that well because you got a nice little flame pattern developing in there, and it kind of throws it off center. This is just you can deal with a Solos. I mean, with your, you know, basic one of these guys. Put them off center and stuff, because it's such a hack. This stove is such a hack. Just you do whatever to make it work. But this is a much more optimized thing that wants certain conditions. If you're using this, you can definitely use it like one of these things. And in fact, that's what's going to happen if you start loading it with a bunch of twigs. Your conditions with the twigs are just so suboptimal. It's basically going to run like a hobo stove. Like, you're not going to get hot enough in here. You're not going to be able to develop a nice flame going on in here. And there are just so many things like sort of wrong with just sticking twigs in here that, yeah, you don't really take advantage of the gas fire effect, and you'll get a lot more smoke if you're just using twigs. But once we get a more optimal source with closer to an optimal air-fuel ratio, I was thinking it's not much like an internal combustion engine when you use those terms, but actually it really is. It's kind of the same thing. You want an optimal amount of combustible fuel to the amount of air. So, and chemistry works by, you know, having the precise proportions. And when you got those precise proportions, you have in a very efficient chemical reaction, which is what's going to happen right at the top of here when the secondary air comes up here and mixes with those gases, the heated gases. Oxygen plus heated gases is going to make fire. So that's your goal. We need something to hold it up a little bit higher. So there's a couple things. I'm going to show you a couple ways that people do this. And then I'm going to, as well as the one that I use, which you've already seen. But I'm going to show you one using this stuff called hardware cloth. And so it's this heavy wire stuff that can come in different gauges of thickness and also different size squares. People use different sizes. And basically all you do is you figure out how much you need and wrap it up to the shape that you want. So it's really pretty simple, and let's say about, it's around that much. Should be able to cut it with scissors. Yeah, some good scissors, shop shears preferably. Or actual wire cutters. And what I wish I had done ahead of time was to go ahead and clip all these edges off, but I don't think I'm actually going to use it myself. You want to decide on what height you want to use. I think most people use about 3. 3 seems to be about the height, and that'll give you a good, like, stable base to use. But just for the idea of seeing what it's going to look like, it'll be kind of getting in the way. You can stick it right down in there in the groove of the paint can. And if the edges had actually been cut off, it would work much better. But you still kind of get the idea of what's supposed to happen. And actually, what usually people cut it off about here, and then there'll be a big gap there where you can keep throwing sticks in there if you're doing the stick method. Gasifier, I mean, if you're really going to using pellets and so you can go after the gasifier effect, then all that becomes kind of unnecessary. And also, one thing, just a common complaint I see online about the hardware cloth, it just sort of melts after a while. It sort of disintegrates, so you'll need to have a little bit more than you need. But it's sort of practical. If you find the problem is that you're not getting enough air or something like that in your weather conditions, then this will enable you to have like lots of air. This will be like tertiary air. If like, I didn't really give you the terminology of this. Down here, this is the primary air. Yeah, what's helping the fire combust in the first place, get your first fire going, enough to heat that up. And then the secondary air comes up, and that's going to be your main cooking air. But then there's also going to be like your tertiary air. Your third stage of air is just the stuff that comes in from the outside under your pots. Unless you have like a real pot shield or something, then you won't really have that third air, which isn't a bad thing, because a lot of times the third air is it's cold air. So you don't want to introduce that. It's going to make it smoky. So in addition to that, you might have something that's a little bit shorter than that. I mean, not shorter than that, about the same height. But you could use a can kind of like this, and you do something like cut out the bottom. In fact, before I show you that, I'll just go back to what I've been using for so long, is this one right here. And so we just set that on top. It's basically our hobo stove. It's the exact one that we just made. And I'll show you after that burn, this is what happened to it. It just has turned like this because of all this coating. And you can see where the coating is coming off of there. So this is what's going to happen to your hobo stove depending on how much coating you have. If it doesn't have much coating, you can imagine it'll stay in pretty good shape. But eventually it's going to get to look something like this. So whether it's this or this, whichever one, you know, even though it's black, it still looks much nicer than this really old one. But it's been going 2 years, so it's pretty cool. So we have this one. And this is what I recommend, this is what I use in my kit, and this is what we're going to be making. But you can still have your own other options and maybe still fit them inside and stuff like that. But I'm also going to give you some other options so that you can, just like in the third stage video after the gasifier, we're going to do some other things so that you have other options besides just using this if it's just too tall, which has been the case for me in enough cases. So, what if you want something that's just a little bit shorter than this? What you could do is one option is you could use a smaller can like this. It's exactly the same size, it's just shorter. And this usually has like meat in it or something like that. So you would just stick that inside, and you can cut out a concentrator ring right there in the middle if you want to do that, or you could just cut off the bottom completely if you don't want that concentrator ring. You cut out the bottom completely, make yourself an optional concentrator ring that you could stick on there if you want it. Personally, I think you should just always use it, but you might have cases where you don't want it or something like that. So that's up to you. So, or you could just take one of these, instead of getting one of those cans, take one of these and cut it down shorter. So we're going to do something like that in this case. Yeah, so we're gonna basically, we need a pot stand. I've given you some options. So in this case, I think we're on to the next video. Was there anything else that I really had to show you? Because I've shown you how this works, right? We just load it up with pellets, and the pellets are really easy to load up. And they come in a 40-pound bag. I'm just gonna, so all I really do is that I take it out of my kit, I stick that down, put that there, and then I put my can on top of there. I add those, and then I can cook. I can also mention all the other things I was able to do with basically my hobo stove is that I sometimes get to the point where like I'm almost done and then this poops out. Well, one thing about this is it's really hard. If you want the gasifier effect that's with low smoke and everything, then you can't just like throw stuff on top of there. It'll put the fire out. It will start smoking really bad because this stuff has to be heated up. So the fire that you had going in there is basically ruined. It becomes cold and it starts smoking a lot. So it just, I mean, you could treat it like a hobo stove. You can still keep loading stuff in there if you want to do that. It'll work like a hobo stove and be really smoky. So if you're willing to do that, just to get your extra 2 minutes that you required your water to boil or your food to finish or something like that, which has happened to me many times. And in the past, what I used to do is I would literally like just, okay, it's done, I'm going to throw it out, and then I'm going to start, I'll just put a new batch in there. So my water gets a little colder while it's sitting there waiting for me to do that, even though it doesn't take that long, but it still gets a lot colder. And then I'll start it again for another 5 minutes. But I found it's really easy to reload this and use this as a hobo stove. And the heat will be coming up to this, up to here. And just as we said before, once you load your bottom ring of sticks in there, you can just start doing this. And let's say it's all set up, it's cooking. So you can start throwing sticks in here like this, and it's a lot easier to get going when you're doing this because the fire in here is burning really hot. You still got a good chimney effect coming up. There's lots of air for it to breathe. There's hardly any sticks in there, so it breathes really well. And as long as you don't try to overstuff it, you'll be able to do this. The sticks will get hot really fast, and they will eventually burn within probably 30 seconds to a minute if your conditions are good. And you can do that, continue adding to it without interfering. If you still need more, you can still keep adding it. And it surprisingly works really well. This configuration also works real well if you need to heat up some charcoals or something like that. And that is a case where I might use the fan, which we're just going to make one of these in our next stage. We're going to take another can, cut it apart, and do a couple other things with it. So I might just stick the can on the bottom of there. So I'll throw out the stick. I'll stick the fan at the bottom. Okay, I don't want my charcoals to fall out, so I'll just load them in there. They'll get heated up from the bottom with a really good flame, not a little flame that's starting up because you're just like killing them, using the paper and stuff like that. It's not all smoky. You got a good flame coming up, and you just be able to heat those coals right up. And in order to get them going on their own, you can also light them from the top. I think there was one other thing that I wanted to mention about the gasifier. But I think it's probably going to come up in the next video when we're making a couple other things, and we'll talk about a number of other creative configurations that you can use for these, in addition to the ones that I've already mentioned. All right, so see ya in a bit.